All right, hey guys, it's Jonathan, and welcome to another video. I'm hoping to do more of these. We send a video currently to one of our prospective clients, a prospect, um, with some description of kind of our thought process is on certain projects, and it was really helpful for them. So I'll do more of them here and look to add them to the website over time. So if there's something you'd like to see, you can always just email us or shoot me a text. Happy to kind of dig into this a little bit better. So this project was kind of interesting. So this was a cedar house down in Deer Run, and it's an older home, probably about 40 years or so. And I'm not sure the original paint job date. I'm not sure when the second paint job was, but I know recently, I can give you a little history. So, like the last 5 or 6 years, the client has had the house like painted in spots, and then it peels, and then it peels again. And um, the previous summer, to us working on this house, towards the end of the summer, a local painter kind of knocked on the door and noticed that there's peeling paint, which is if we see peeling paint in your house, we're gonna knock on it too. Um, eh, but the idea was like, hey, we can get this rid of this peeling paint and get the house painted. What ended up happening was the painter ended up scraping the parts of the house that were where the paint was peeling and then primed them. That's why it kind of looks like a bit of like a Dalmatian here. Okay. Um, and then winter came, it started to get cold, and the client was like, listen, you're not painting anymore. You're done. Thanks, but whatever. Um, so this year, I met this client, and actually, this client, I had done work on their commercial building. He said, can you come have a look at our house? And I came and had a look, and we realized that, okay, the house looks like a polka dot. All right, the previous painter had scraped, and he's like, could you give me a quote and can we do it? And so we we literally got started on this house before there was any like quote involved, just because it things needed to get done, and I was also giving this guy a fantastic price. But the idea here is that the previous painter, what they had done was there's a tool called a 5-in-1 tool that painters use, which is kind of like a bit of a multi-tool. It looks like an oversized like chisel, but the blade on it is quite is not super sharp. But what they did was they went around, they scraped, and then they spot primed, and the plan was just kind of paint this as is. Okay, so what I wanted to do was I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. Like a painter may come to you and say, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, we can paint your house and it's X amount of dollars and you're great. Problem is you're not great, and I'm gonna show you why. Okay, so this was the original side of the house. Okay, that when I'm just showing you photos of this one section, because basically it was the same all the way around. It was actually worse. But you'll notice on this, and you might have to zoom in on your on your screen, but you can see the paint is quite faded. It's chalky. Like if I rub my hand on it, it comes off in your hand. If your paint is doing that, that's chalky. And what causes that is that inexpensive paint over time. Well, first of all, inexpensive paint is full of product that is not titanium dioxide. So the thing that gives paint its weight, its value, what makes one paint cost more than another, is typically the amount of titanium dioxide in the paint. Now, so by volume, solids by volume, somebody with a different brand of paint can say, hey, this one has the same amount of it's the same weight by volume, but it's like half the price. And you're thinking, well, why wouldn't I go with that? Well, the reason why you wouldn't go with that is because what that's filled with, what's making that up, is not material that is good to the longevity of the product on your house. Okay, so in an effort to save a couple bucks on the paint, and in the grand scheme of your paint job, the paint cost is minimal compared to the labor. Trying to save money on paint is not where you want to be saving money. Because this, in particular, this house had been painted a few years ago, and it's already chalky. I think it was 5 years ago. It's already chalky. You can see the nails coming through from the cedar, and then it's peeling, and so none of that is good. None of that's good. But another painter came by and said, "Hey, we can paint your house for like a few $1,000s. Isn't that great?" And the client might think, "Well, yeah, sure. We had it peeled and scraped last year, and it's ready to go." Well, that's not quite the case either. So what we did here what you see in white here, that was the previous painters, two previous painters, their spot primes. Okay. And then this was us. We did some test paint to find some colors and some sheens that the client would like. Now, one of the things that's interesting here is that I'm born and raised in New England, where we're very used to having old houses that have been painted multiple times, where you had peeling paint, scraped, repainted, scraped, repainted, and you get these lines. We call these ghost lines. There's lots of different names for these, but when you put new paint over them, it takes some getting used to, because it doesn't look nice and clean like a brand new hardy board or vinyl siding or brand new cedar that's been painted. So it takes some getting used to. So these are some test patches for us. Okay, so what we ended up doing on this project was we started peeling peeling at the house. And so this was actually the second side, or the third side that we did. We actually started out on the back side, but you'll notice the guys have putty knives. Putty knives have a sharper blade, and what we were running into immediately was that 75% in some spots, 80%, some spots, 100% of the paint was coming off this house with just a little bit of effort. Now, if a painter had just painted over that, you're spending thousands of dollars that is just going to come off in a couple years. So this is the boys. They're tied up on the roof, and they're starting to get after it, and the paint is just peeling away. Okay, so here's just a shot of what that ended up looking like, and you'll notice that even the spots that had been previously primed were coming off. Okay, and so that's really, really important. So this is that front face. And this was just, one day we got started on it from the ground. Boys were just kind of using their putty knife and just kind of scraping it. And look at that. And what's really interesting here is you'll see this area here, we had painted a test patch, and prior to scraping, and the paint came right off. So that's a great example of like how if you just painted over all this old paint, then the thousands and thousands of dollars you're spending on labor and paint is worthless. Okay, so what ended up happening here is like the original paint job, the original paint job that was first put on the cedar was no longer adhering to the cedar. The cedar was basically letting loose of the paint, and that original paint job did not get into the oils of the cedar, so it created like a really good bond, and that's where the original fault lay on this paint job. So there's another photo. Okay, that's what it ended up looking like. But we kept going, and actually, just jumping ahead, this is the guy's priming that side. But here's a shot. You'll see in his hand is so he basically came all the way across here with a putty knife, and the paint just came right off in his hand in a big long strip. And that's basically what we ran into on this house over and over and over again. And you'll see like 95% of these boards are bare. Now, when it comes to quoting a job like this is where, as painters, we cringe, because until you get into a job, you don't really know what you're running into. And what we had happen here was, instead of basically running into some small areas to scrape, this turned into a 75 to 100% full scrape. And that's on this house, that was close to 180 hours of labor, I think, 200 hours of labor. And you start, doing like a 40-hour week and start adding up, like it's like 2 weeks scraping, and that might have been even light. So, but you'll see how the blade of his knife is just going right under that, and that's what we end up doing. So what ends up happening here is that if you don't do this kind of prep, you're basically in 2 years, or maybe even a year, you're starting to see more peeling and cracking and failing, because the top coat that gets on there has nothing to really stick to. And you're basically, it's like having a loose sheet of paper on your desk. Like, on my desk here, I've got a couple loose sheets of paper. If I painted that paper and then I could just pick the paper off, like that's basically what you're doing. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay. This ultimately was like the side of the house once we were done with it. This was probably a primer coat and one coat of paint. So this isn't the finished product, and you'll see here, like this is where we had to stop from the roof, and then we're moving around towards the front, coming on this side. But the bottom line here is that you prep is everything, and with our company, what we like thrive on is being a good quality company. Like I tell my clients, I don't want to hear from you for 8, 10, 12 years. And because we want to take your house from ever going like this to going like that last photo. Now, what did we paint this house with? So we used Aura by Benjamin Moore, which is the top of the line, most color fast paint you can put on a house. It goes on fantastic. And like I put it on my own house, and it is by far the best choice for color longevity. And if you get 2 coats of Aura on your house, then depending on what side of the house it is, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. I've seen houses with Aura on it for 12 years on some sides. Looks brand new. Then you can recoat with 1 coat and be good to go. You don't have to necessarily scrape it all down again and do it a second time. That's not realistic. But if you put cheap paint on your house and you pay for all the labor to put cheap paint on the house, and so what is cheap paint? Well, every brand makes cheaper paint, but within their line. However, there's some, and I don't want to trash talk any of our brands because we work with all the brands, but everybody knows that there's some lines that if you just want quick and dirty and cheap, that's what you go with. But to the general consumer, and we don't use any paint from any big box stores either. Big box store paint, the consumer thinks that it's the big box store, it must be good. No, the reason it's at the big box store is because it's just inexpensive. There's high margins for the retailer. It's made quickly and easily, and they can get lots of it. Just is what it is. But it's definitely not our go-to from a professional paint, from a professional renovation standpoint. It's not our go-to. So, especially with cedar houses, especially with wood, you want to sand it down, get it to the raw wood as much as you can, and then from there you're going to prime it. Priming is always using a primer is always a good choice. There are paints now that are called self-priming. That is more for the DIY home consumer, not necessarily what we would recommend in a professional paint environment. But to get that primer on there, to get that really seal with the wood, and then you're going to go over with your top coats. Now, this house, what also happened to us on this house was that this wood was so dry and so thirsty, it basically sucked up like 3 coats of paint like nothing. That primer coat, 2 coats. We ended up going to a 4th coat, which would have been a 3rd coat of Aura. And then the client also wasn't super happy with like the texture. They liked that buildup of paint, so we went with another coat of paint, and finally got it to a level where it's deep. But even then, the client is going to have to get used to having that cedar siding now look like where there's some ghost lines and things like that. But those are things where at first you notice it all the time, but after a while your eyes go towards other things. And like I said, growing up in New England, we're used to it all the time. So I hope that helps. We want to make sure that our clients are totally taken care of, and so that's why our price points are higher. That's why we're taking extra. There's extra labor involved. There's higher quality paints involved. But we want to be that go-to for our clients. But at the end of the day, this client was, thinking about doing hardy board on some sides of the house. They won't have to do that now, for a really, really long time. So, if at all. Okay. So that's it. If you got any questions, you can leave me a comment or shoot me an email, shoot me a text. Happy to answer as much as I can. And we're looking forward to doing your project next. Cheers.